The afternoon sun slanted through the streaked windows of Sweetie's Bakery as Diane Miller stood at the counter, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, but I need to cancel the birthday cake order for Saturday." Her fingers trembled around her purse, knuckles white with the effort of staying composed. The cozy shop, with its warm vanilla and cinnamon air, had always been a refuge. Today it felt like another reminder of everything slipping out of reach. Cancel? Nancy, the bakery owner, pushed her reading glasses down her nose. "But Ms. Miller, we've already started on the baseball design. Tommy's turning 8, right?" "I know, and I'm so sorry. Something came up with work, and Diane's voice cracked. She couldn't force out the truth, that the hospital had cut her hours, and the choice had come down to a cake or the electricity bill. "I'll still pay the deposit," she added quickly. "I know it's short notice." What neither woman realized was that the tall man in the corner booth had stopped pretending to read his phone. James Harrington, on his way to a conference, had ducked into the small-town bakery while his driver refueled at the gas station across the street. The charcoal suit that cost more than most people's rent looked almost absurd among gingham curtains and worn linoleum. Usually, his thoughts spun around stock prices and acquisitions. But the slope of the woman's shoulders, turned inward as if under an invisible load, caught his attention and held it. "Don't worry about the deposit, honey," Nancy said, reaching across the counter to squeeze Diane's hand. "You can use it another time." "Is Tommy very disappointed?" "He doesn't know yet," Diane whispered, swiping quickly at her eyes. "I'll figure something out. Maybe cupcakes from the grocery store. I just hate to let him down again." James watched her leave, head held high despite the obvious strain. Through the window, he saw her climb into an aging sedan, sit motionless, then rest her forehead against the steering wheel. "Tough situation?" he asked when Nancy came over to refill his coffee. "Oh, you have no idea." She glanced toward the door. "Diane works harder than anyone I know. 2 jobs, raising that sweet boy alone since his father walked out 3 years ago. Tommy's been talking about this birthday party for months. Baseball theme. He's crazy about it. Keeps saying this is the year the Red Sox scouts will discover him." She tried to smile. "Diane's been saving, but life keeps throwing curveballs." James nodded, his coffee cooling untouched. At 42, he had more money than he could reasonably spend in 10 lifetimes. His charitable foundation handed out millions each year, but he rarely saw the faces behind the grants anymore. Staff handled everything, he just signed. "What kind of cake was it going to be?" he asked. "Baseball field," Nancy said, her eyes brightening. "Green frosting for the grass, white for the bases, Tommy's name on the pitcher's mound. I was going to make tiny fondant players. That boy deserves something special." James reached for his wallet. "I'd like to pay for the cake. And whatever else would make a great party." Nancy stared, recognition dawning. "You're just someone who remembers what it's like to look forward to a birthday," he cut in gently. "My mother worked 3 jobs. There were years when cake was a luxury we couldn't afford." Within minutes, the idea had grown beyond a cake. A full party at the town baseball field. James made calls while Nancy phoned Diane's best friend Kelly to coordinate. By the time he left the bakery, he'd cleared his weekend calendar and postponed the conference. Something in this small-town drama had stirred memories he buried beneath spreadsheets and boardrooms. 3 days later, Tommy Miller woke on his 8th birthday expecting nothing more than his mother's traditional pancake breakfast. Lately, plans seemed to unravel as fast as his mom could make them. Baseball camp canceled. Their move to a better apartment delayed. Her tired smiles. He knew money was tight, though what that meant exactly was fuzzy in his 8-year-old brain. "Ready for your birthday surprise?" Diane asked, eyes sparkling in a way he hadn't seen in months. "Pancakes," he guessed, already grateful. "Better. Get dressed. Baseball gear today." His heart thudded as they drove toward the town's baseball field. When he spotted balloons tied to the fence and a crowd gathered near the dugout, he frowned. "Mom, what's happening?" Diane couldn't speak. She only smiled, blinking back tears. When they parked and got out, Tommy recognized his classmates, Little League teammates and neighbors. "Surprise!" they shouted. The field had been transformed. A tent shaded tables loaded with food and drinks. Baseball-themed decorations were everywhere. At the center sat a magnificent cake shaped like a baseball diamond, exactly like the one he'd described to his mother months before while flipping through Nancy's catalog. "We're having your party at a real baseball field," Diane explained, voice steady despite the emotion in it. "Someone very kind wanted to make your birthday special." Tommy was speechless, eyes huge as he took it all in. Standing off to the side, James watched, an unexpected lump in his throat. He'd spent billions on deals with no second thought, but the pure joy on this boy's face hit him with startling force. The afternoon filled with impromptu games, presents, hot dogs, and laughter. Local coaches volunteered to run drills. A professional photographer captured everything for a memory book Nancy insisted on. James stayed mostly in the background, stepping forward only when Diane approached him, drawn by curiosity and gratitude. "I can't possibly thank you enough," she said, watching Tommy tear around the bases, face flushed with happiness. "You don't need to," James replied. "Sometimes life deals unfair hands. I've been lucky enough to get more than my share of good cards. Feels right to redistribute the deck once in a while." As the light slanted low and parents began herding reluctant children home, Tommy finally approached the tall stranger he'd been eyeing all day. "Mom says you're the reason we had this amazing party," he said bluntly, looking up at James. "She says you're like a baseball scout, but for people who need help." James crouched to meet his gaze. "Your mom is the real hero, Tommy. I just pitched in for one day. She's batting for you every single day." Tommy considered this solemnly, then with the fierce impulsiveness of childhood, flung his arms around James's neck in a tight hug. "This was the best day ever," he whispered. James stiffened, then carefully returned the embrace. Something shifted in his chest, a wall crumbling he hadn't realized was there. As the sunset painted the sky orange and purple, none of them had any idea how much this chance encounter would change their lives. The story was only beginning. The Monday after the party, James sat in his top-floor office overlooking the Boston skyline. Quarterly reports spread across his desk. The numbers swam. His thoughts kept drifting back to a sunlit baseball field, to Tommy's uninhibited laughter and Diane's tearful smile. A sense of purpose, different from profit, different from innovation, had stirred awake. "Mr. Harrington?" His assistant Patricia stood in the doorway. "Your 10 o'clock was cancelled, but there's something else that needs your attention." He nodded absently, still gazing at the city. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked cautiously. "You've seemed distracted since you got back." James turned to regard the woman who'd managed his life for 7 years. Only now did it occur to him he'd never asked about her family, or what she wanted beyond this job. "Patricia, do we have any programs that directly help working families?" he asked. "Not big checks to large charities. Something more personal." She blinked. "The foundation handles our philanthropy, but it's mostly large grants to established organizations. Nothing aimed at individual families, that I know of." "Let's change that," James said. "Set up a meeting with the foundation team, and find out if we have contacts at Mercy Hospital in Riverdale." "Riverdale? That's nearly 2 hours from Boston." "I'm aware," he said. "It's important." He couldn't explain even to himself why the image of Diane at the bakery counter, shoulders straight, dignity intact even as she canceled her son's cake, wouldn't leave him. She reminded him of his own mother, who had cleaned houses and waited tables after his father died, never complaining no matter how exhausted she looked. In Riverdale, the afterglow of the birthday party lingered in a different way. Tommy couldn't stop talking about Mr. James and the best day of his life. His joy was contagious, but it stirred unease in Diane. She prided herself on self-reliance. Accepting such generosity, especially from a billionaire, left her feeling both grateful and strangely diminished. "Mom, can we send Mr. James a thank you card?" Tommy asked one afternoon, holding up a glitter-splattered construction paper card covered in baseball stickers. "I made this in art." Diane ruffled his hair, smiling. "That's very thoughtful, honey. But I'm not sure how to reach him. Miss Nancy at the bakery might know," he said. She talked to him a lot. The suggestion made sense, but the bakery was now tangled in her mind with humiliation and rescue. She wasn't sure she was ready to go back. Later that week, Diane's supervisor called her into the hospital office. Her stomach clenched, bracing for another cut in hours. "Diane, I've received an unusual request," said Dr. Winters, expression unreadable. "The Harrington Foundation has approached us about a new nursing scholarship program. They specifically asked whether we had staff interested in advancing their medical education." Diane blinked. "That's wonderful for the hospital. But what does that have to do with me? The foundation representative mentioned you by name." The room tilted. "Me? That has to be a mistake." "No mistake." Dr. Winters slid a folder across the desk. "Mr. Harrington himself requested that you be informed. Full tuition for an RN program plus a stipend for living expenses. They're calling it the Second Chance Scholarship." Diane's hand shook as she opened the folder. An official letter from the Harrington Foundation laid out a program that read as if it had been built around her life. Classes that fit around her shifts, childcare assistance, mentoring, emergency support. It was overwhelming and unnerving. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll apply," Dr. Winters urged. "You're one of our hardest workers, Diane. You deserve this shot." That evening, while Tommy did homework at their small kitchen table, Diane paced, scholarship papers in hand. "What's wrong, Mom? You keep walking like Mrs. Peterson's cat when it's hungry." She smiled despite herself. "Just thinking, buddy. About these papers." "Is it bills again?" he asked, face suddenly serious. "No. Actually, it's something good. Potentially. Just complicated." Tommy nodded, wise beyond his years. "Like when Coach says I have great potential, but complicated mechanics." Diane laughed, tension easing for a moment. "Something like that." The next day, she steeled herself and walked back into Sweetie's bakery. This time with purpose instead of defeat. "Nancy, I need to ask you something about Mr. Harrington. I was wondering when you'd come by," Nancy said, smiling knowingly. "That man was quite taken with you and Tommy." Diane blushed. "Not like that. He set up a scholarship at the hospital. And somehow my name came up specifically. It feels targeted. I'm grateful but also confused. He asked a lot of questions about you after you left that day," Nancy said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Not in a creepy way," she added quickly. "He just seemed concerned. Said you reminded him of his mother." "His mother? Apparently she raised him alone. Worked multiple jobs. He said watching you was like seeing what she went through, all over again." The information shifted something inside Diane. Not charity then. Empathy. A bridge, however fragile, between their very different worlds. While Diane wrestled with the offer, James was making broader changes inspired by the Millers. The Harrington Foundation launched a new initiative focused on supporting working single parents, especially those pursuing healthcare education. Riverdale would be the pilot site, with plans to expand nationally. 2 weeks after Tommy's birthday, a knock startled Diane out of her thoughts. She opened the door to find Nancy from the bakery holding a large envelope. "Special delivery," Nancy said with a conspiratorial grin. "Someone dropped this off for you." Inside was a brief note on expensive stationery. "Mrs. Miller, I hope you'll consider the scholarship. It isn't charity. It's an investment in someone whose determination and heart our healthcare system desperately needs. No strings, no obligations. Entirely your decision." Separately, Tommy left quite an impression. "Enclosed is a season pass for the Red Sox home games. My driver can arrange transportation for any you'd like to attend. Again, no obligations, only an opportunity if you choose. With respect and admiration, James Harrington P.S. The baseball scout joke was the best I've heard in years." In her other hand, Diane held the season tickets, worth more than she'd make in months. "Well," Nancy prompted, "he's either the most generous man alive or what?" Diane asked. "I don't know." Nancy shrugged. "Why you? There are thousands of families like yours. Maybe you're not special, no offense. Maybe you're just the one he happened to see. Sometimes being seen is enough." That night, after putting Tommy to bed, Diane decided she would accept the scholarship. Education meant long-term stability for both of them. The season tickets, however, felt too personal, too intimate a luxury. She composed a careful email to the foundation. Profound thanks, acceptance of the scholarship, polite refusal of the tickets, and a photo of Tommy's handmade card attached. The reply arrived within minutes despite the late hour. The scholarship is yours. Congratulations. As for the tickets, I understand your hesitation, but please reconsider, for Tommy's sake. I grew up without opportunities like this and would have given anything to share such experiences with my mother. My driver is professional and trustworthy. Perhaps try one game? No ulterior motives, I assure you. Diane stared at the screen, emotions tangled. Was this just the whim of a bored billionaire? Or something more meaningful? And why did the difference matter so much to her? The crack of the bat echoed through Fenway Park as a Red Sox slugger sent the ball arcing toward the green monster. Tommy leapt to his feet, nearly spilling his soda. "Mom, did you see that 3-run homer?" he shouted, eyes blazing with excitement. "These seats are amazing. We can see everything." Diane smiled in spite of herself. After 3 weeks of gentle pressure from Tommy and polite insistence from James, she'd finally agreed to one game. Now they sat in premium box seats behind home plate, seats that cost more than her rent. "Mr. Peterson at school won't believe I was this close," Tommy said, gripping his new Red Sox cap, the one indulgence she'd allowed. "Can we take a picture to show him?" As she raised her phone, a discreet voice spoke from her left. "Excuse me, would you like me to take one of both of you?" An elegant older woman in a Red Sox jacket smiled at her. "That would be wonderful, thank you," Diane said, handing over the phone. The woman snapped several pictures and returned it with a warm smile. "Your son is having quite the time. First baseball game. First professional game," Tommy chimed in. "We're here because Mr. James gave us tickets. He's a billionaire who helped when Mom had to cancel my birthday cake. And now Mom's going to be a real nurse because of his scholarship." Diane flushed. "Tommy, honey, we don't have to share all our personal. No need to be embarrassed," the woman said, amusement crinkling her eyes. "James has always had a good eye for recognizing worthy investments." Diane's attention sharpened. "You know Mr. Harrington?" "Know him." The woman extended her hand. "I raised him. Eleanor Harrington." Diane nearly choked. "Mrs. Harrington, I had no idea you'd be here." "Eleanor, please," she said, waving off the formality. "James doesn't know I'm here either. I've had a season ticket in the next section for 40 years. When he mentioned giving tickets to a nursing student and her baseball-loving son, I was curious." She winked at Tommy. "Wanted to see who'd caught my son's attention." Oblivious to subtext, Tommy launched into a breathless retelling of his birthday party. Eleanor listened with genuine interest, occasionally glancing at Diane's increasingly uneasy expression. When Tommy dashed off to buy a foam finger with his carefully counted allowance, Eleanor turned. "He's overstepping, isn't he? My son." Diane hesitated. "I am incredibly grateful for everything Mr. Harrington has done. The scholarship will change our lives. But..." She swallowed. "I can't help wondering why us. Why me? It feels so personal it makes me uneasy." Eleanor nodded. "James lost his father when he was 6. I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. No time or money for baseball games then," she added, a trace of sadness in her voice. "He built his empire from nothing, but it cost him. He's brilliant with technology and hopeless with people, especially since the divorce." Diane hadn't known he was divorced. Somehow, that fact made him more human. "When he called about you," Eleanor went on, "it was the first time in years I heard real emotion in his voice. Whatever his reasons, they're sincere." Her gaze sharpened. "But you're right to maintain boundaries. Kindness shouldn't create obligation." Before Diane could respond, Tommy returned, proudly waving his foam finger, and the conversation drifted back to baseball. But Eleanor's words stayed with her. After the game, a thrilling Red Sox win, they were escorted to a waiting car by James's driver Robert, a grandfatherly man who'd entertained Tommy with baseball trivia on the way to Fenway. "Did you enjoy the game, young man?" he asked, holding the door. "Best day ever," Tommy declared. Then with blunt hopefulness, "Is Mr. James coming to see us?" Robert glanced at Diane. "Mr. Harrington is in California on business right now." "Oh." Tommy's disappointment was clear. "I wanted to thank him and tell him about the home run." "I'm sure he'd love to hear about it," Robert said. "Maybe you could write him a letter." Tommy brightened immediately, launching into plans for what he would say. Diane stayed quiet on the ride home, replaying her conversation with Eleanor and sorting through the complicated emotions James evoked. The start of the nursing program left Diane little time to brood. Classes, studying, and her continued shifts at the hospital filled every waking hour. She threw herself into the work, fiercely grateful for the opportunity, whatever its origins. Nearly a month passed without any direct contact from James. Foundation staff checked in regularly to ensure the scholarship program ran smoothly. Tommy faithfully mailed handwritten letters after each Red Sox game, addressed to Mr. James at the foundation office. Whether James actually saw them, Diane had no idea. Then on a rainy Tuesday, Diane entered the hospital break room to find her coworkers clustered around the TV. "What's going on?" she asked, dropping her lunch bag. "Harrington's new healthcare initiative," Dr. Winters said, nodding toward the screen where James stood at a podium. "He just pledged $50 million to improve rural and underserved hospitals nationwide." Diane stepped closer. On screen, James looked every inch the polished tech mogul, confident, articulate. Yet she noticed a faint stiffness in his shoulders, a flicker of discomfort behind the professional smile. "The Harrington Second Chance Initiative will focus on both infrastructure and personnel development," he said. "We've already piloted a nursing scholarship program that's showing promising results." A reporter raised a hand. "Mr. Harrington, this is a major shift in your foundation's focus. What inspired it?" For a moment, James's facade slipped. "Sometimes we need reminders of what truly matters," he said quietly. "Healthcare isn't just about technology. It's about people. People who make hard choices, who sacrifice daily to care for others." His gaze seemed to drift past the cameras. "This initiative honors my mother, who worked as a hospital aide while raising me, and every parent who's ever stood at a counter choosing between necessities and small joys." Heat rose in Diane's cheeks as a few coworkers turned to look at her, connecting the dots. "He's talking about you," whispered Nancy from radiology. "You're the inspiration for a $50 million program." Overwhelmed, Diane slipped out into a quiet hallway. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I hope I didn't overstep mentioning the scholarship program. Your privacy remains paramount. JH." Of course, the foundation paperwork had her number. She hesitated, then replied, "The initiative sounds wonderful. Many families will benefit. Tommy and I enjoyed the Red Sox games, especially meeting your mother." The response came quickly. "My mother was there?" She introduced herself. "Lovely woman," Diane wrote. There was a longer pause. "She's always been my best advisor and worst meddler. I apologize if she said anything inappropriate." Diane smiled despite herself. "She said you're brilliant with technology, hopeless with people." "Accurate," he replied. "May I call you? There's something I'd like to discuss regarding the foundation." Her thumb hovered. This was a boundary. Yet she felt oddly at ease crossing it. "I'm at work until 6. After Tommy's bedtime, 8:30 would be best." That night, after tucking in an exhausted Tommy, Diane sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. When it rang at exactly 8:30, she took a breath and answered. "Mrs. Miller, thank you for taking my call." "It's Ms. and please call me Diane." "Diane," he corrected himself. "Then I'm James. Not Mr. Harrington." She could hear the smile in his voice. "I wanted your feedback on the scholarship program," he said. "We're considering expansion, and your experience is invaluable." For the next hour, they talked about the realities of juggling school, work, and single parenthood. Childcare gaps, scheduling conflicts, the guilt of divided attention. James listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and never once sounded patronizing. "You should be talking to education experts," she protested at one point. "Not a student who's only been in the program a few weeks." "Experts give theory," James said. "You give reality. That's far more useful." Gradually, the conversation drifted from logistics to life. Tommy's baseball dreams. James's latest tech project. Books they both loved. When she finally checked the clock, nearly 3 hours had passed. "I'd like to continue this," James said as they wrapped up. "Perhaps in person if you're comfortable. Purely professional, of course," he added quickly. The foundation could benefit enormously from your ongoing input. Diane hesitated. She could feel something shifting, but she also thought of Tommy. I'd be happy to help the foundation, she said carefully. For Tommy's sake as much as others. Every child deserves a birthday cake. By the time autumn painted Riverdale in red and gold, 6 months had passed since that canceled cake. Life for the Millers looked very different. The nursing program was demanding but deeply satisfying. Tommy thrived in a new after-school program funded by the Harrington Foundation. Money was still tight but no longer terrifyingly fragile. What had begun as a strictly professional collaboration between Diane and James had become something neither had planned. Their first in-person meeting, coffee in a quiet cafe to discuss program tweaks, turned into dinner the following week, then a standing pattern. Whenever he could, James made the 2-hour drive from Boston. "Mom, is Mr. James coming tonight?" Tommy asked one afternoon, looking up from his homework at the kitchen table. The question held no accusation, just hopeful curiosity. "Yes," Diane said, checking the lasagna in the oven. "He said he's bringing those astronomy books you asked about." Tommy grinned. "Awesome. I need them for my science project. Do you think he'll help me build the solar system model too?" "You can ask him yourself," she said, forcing her tone to stay casual despite the flutter low in her stomach. These dinners had quietly become the highlight of her week. James arrived at 6 sharp, arms full. The promised stack of astronomy books and a compact telescope. "The books explain the concepts," he said as Tommy flung himself at him in greeting. "But nothing beats seeing the real thing." Watching James answer Tommy's breathless questions about Jupiter's moons, Diane felt a complicated warmth. For a man who claimed to be awkward with people, he moved easily in her tiny kitchen, utterly at home helping an 8-year-old with homework. Later, after Tommy dragged himself reluctantly to bed with a promise from James to set up the telescope that weekend, Diane and James stepped out onto the small balcony, mugs of tea warming their hands. "The foundation board approved all your suggested changes," he said. "Childcare stipend increase, mentor network, emergency fund, everything. We're rolling out to 5 more hospitals next month." "That's wonderful," Diane said, pride tinged with a faint sadness. "Those changes will make such a difference." "But," he prompted gently. She stared into her tea. "I'm just realizing that as the program grows, you won't really need my input anymore. These dinners, these conversations, they'll naturally end." James set his mug down, turning to face her fully. "Is that what you think this is?" he asked quietly. "A consulting arrangement?" "Isn't it?" she asked, uncertain. "That's how it started." "Diane." There was a new intensity in his voice. "I drive 2 hours each way multiple times a week. I've rescheduled board meetings, delegated critical projects, turned down speaking engagements worth more than I care to admit. All to eat lasagna at your table and help an 8-year-old with his spelling." Her breath caught. "Why?" "Because this," he gestured between them, "is the first real thing I've felt in years. Maybe ever." Silence hummed between them, thick with possibility and fear. Diane had been burned before. She knew too well that fairy tales rarely belong to single mothers juggling shifts and tuition. "I'm scared," she whispered at last. "Not just for me. For Tommy. He's already so attached to you. If this doesn't work." "I understand the stakes," James said softly. "I've never wanted to be a father figure before. Never even thought about it. Until I met Tommy. Until I met you." Before she could respond, her phone rang. The hospital needed her for an emergency shift. Reality as always cut in. As James prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Think about what I said," he murmured. "We can go as slowly as you need." "I will," she said, overwhelmed by the future opening in front of them. The weeks that followed were a blur. Midterm swallowed Diane's study hours. A crisis in one of James's subsidiaries dragged him to California. They spoke every day, but nearly 2 weeks passed without seeing each other, the longest since their dinners had begun. Tommy grew increasingly anxious. "Is he not coming back?" he asked one night as they cleaned up from dinner. "Dad said he'd come back too. But he didn't." The words cut deep. "This is different, honey," Diane said quietly. "James is just very busy with work. He called yesterday, remember? Asked all about your science project. Tommy nodded, not quite reassured. But what if he forgets us? He has a big important company and fancy cars and probably lots of rich friends. His fears echoed Diane's own private doubts. No matter James's sincerity, the gulf between their worlds remained wide. That weekend, as they glued styrofoam planets to Tommy's solar system model, Diane's phone chimed with a text. Emergency resolved. Back in Boston. May I see you both tomorrow? I've missed you more than I can say. Before she could answer, someone knocked. Opening the door, she found Eleanor Harrington holding a white bakery box stamped with Sweetie's logo. Eleanor, this is a surprise, Diane said. Good surprise, I hope. Eleanor smiled. Nancy said you've been pulling doubles. I thought you and Tommy might appreciate some of her cinnamon rolls. Diane ushered her in and introduced Tommy, who was shy at first but quickly enchanted when Eleanor crouched to admire his half-finished solar system. James was obsessed with space at your age, she told him. Built a rocket in our backyard when he was 10. Nearly set the neighbor's tree on fire. Tommy howled with laughter at the idea of his billionaire hero as a clumsy kid. While he went back to painting planets, Eleanor turned to Diane with her usual frankness. He's miserable without you, you know. Diane busied herself with the coffee. We've both been busy. His company needed him in California. The company always needs him. That's the excuse he's used for years to avoid real connection. Eleanor took the mug Diane offered. What you may not know is this is the first time he's resented work for keeping him away from someone. Diane swallowed hard. Her feelings for James had turned into something deep and frightening, something she hadn't even named to herself. When my first husband died, Eleanor continued, voice softening, I thought love was over for me. Too many responsibilities, too much risk. I used that as my excuse for 12 years. Did you find it again? Diane asked. Eleanor's eyes sparkled. Robert and I have been married 26 years. Robert. Diane repeated. Your driver, Robert? James is driver now, Eleanor corrected, chuckling at Diane's expression. Life offers second chances in the most unexpected packages. The question is whether we're brave enough to accept them. After Eleanor left, Diane sat on the balcony long after dark, thinking about second chances and unexpected packages. When her phone rang just after 9, she already knew whose name she'd see. I'm back, James said without preamble. Mother mentioned she visited. I hope she behaved herself. She brought cinnamon rolls and stories about your childhood pyrotechnics, Diane said. Tommy was delighted. And you. I was glad to know you weren't always perfect. He was quiet for a moment. I've never been perfect, Diane. But these past months with you and Tommy I've been better. Happier. More myself than I've ever been. The vulnerability in his voice loosened something in her. We've missed you, she admitted. Both of us. I've been thinking, he said carefully. The foundation is opening a new office in Riverdale to manage the scholarship expansion. It would be practical for me to spend more time there. Closer to the project. The project, she echoed, amused. And to you, he added, unflinching now. If that's what you want too. 6 months after a cancelled cake had brought them into each other's orbit, James and Diane sat side by side on the bleachers at Tommy's baseball field, watching him at practice. The air held the first sharpness of oncoming winter. He's getting better, James observed as Tommy cracked a line drive over second. The coaching helps. So does the new practice field you funded. Small investment, big returns the Harrington way, Diane teased. James shrugged it off as he always did with her thanks. She studied his profile in the fading light. Is that how you see us? An investment. He turned to meet her gaze. The best I've ever made, he said quietly. But not in the way you mean. He threaded his fingers through hers. You and Tommy showed me what I was missing while I built my empire, he said. Purpose. Connection. Joy in simple things. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Tommy run the bases, his laughter carrying across the field. The past half year hadn't been without friction. Diane's fierce independence sometimes clashed with James's instinct to solve every problem with a check. Their worlds didn't always mesh easily. Tommy needed steady reassurance that this new arrangement was here to stay. But they were finding their way. I have something for you, James said suddenly, reaching into his jacket. At her wary look he added quickly, not what you're thinking. That conversation can wait until you're ready. He handed her an envelope. Inside lay a property deed to a modest house just a few blocks from their apartment, close to Tommy's school, the hospital, and the park where he played ball. James, I can't accept this, she said immediately. It's not a gift, he said. It's an investment property owned by the foundation, designated as housing for scholarship recipients. You'd be the program administrator, living on site, mentoring future students. Salary included. Diane narrowed her eyes. You built an entire housing program just to give me a house without making me feel like a charity case. The program is real, he protested a little sheepishly. We've been planning it for months. Your input helped shape it. And the house just happens to have 3 bedrooms, a home office, and a backyard perfect for a telescope. Very convenient, she said dryly. Functional requirements for the administrator, he replied, mock serious, before his expression softened. I want to give you and Tommy the world, Diane. But I'm learning what matters most is being part of that world with you. However you'll have me. Tommy jogged toward them then, cheeks red from exertion, eyes bright. Did you see my hit? He panted. Coach says I have a natural swing. We saw, James said, shifting so Tommy could squeeze between them on the bench. Outstanding form. As Tommy launched into an animated play-by-play of his latest at-bat, James looked over his head at Diane. The look they shared held a quiet promise. The path ahead wouldn't be simple, but some journeys were worth every difficult step. We accept, Diane said softly, squeezing James's hand. The position, and everything that comes with it. They turned their attention back to the boy between them. A family not born of blood but of choice, of second chances accepted, and of a future far brighter than any of them could have imagined that afternoon in Sweetie's bakery, when a canceled cake changed everything.